Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for today's Spark Virtual Series event, Career Perspectives for Students. So my name is Tony Hansen, and I'm a Regional and Licensing Associate at WiSys. Now, for those of you not familiar with WiSys, we are an independent, not-for-profit supporting organization of the UW system and serve as the technology transfer office for the comprehensive campuses. So each year, WiSys hosts its annual symposium, Spark, and welcomes faculty, staff, students, as well as industry representatives from across the state to honor research, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the UW system. Now, of course, this year, in place of the large in-person event, we have developed a series of virtual events to ensure we are still providing quality content to our campuses and highlighting the campus innovators. So today's event will feature a group of 5 panelists representing different career perspectives. Our hope is that the students joining us today will gain a few insights from the different discussions. We hope you will recognize the diversity and sometimes unconventionality of career paths available to graduates, that you'll identify skills and experiences that will differentiate you during job candidacy and help you to be successful in your future career endeavors. And finally, learn relevant insights regarding the job market during COVID-19 and beyond. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today's event. So representing the industry perspective, we have Darin Driessen, Director of Open Innovation at Georgia Pacific. We have, representing the entrepreneurship perspective, Dr. Adhira Sunkara, the WiSys Manager of Innovative Ventures. For the academia perspective, we have Dr. Catherine Chan, the UW Eau Claire Executive Director of Sponsored Programs. In the not-for-profit perspective, we have Dr. Christopher Tyrrell, Research Curator at the Milwaukee Public Museum. And for the intellectual property perspective, we have Sarah Wong, partner at the firm Boyle Fredrickson. So thank you all for volunteering your time and joining us today. So let's kick things off. All right, so I'll kind of call on each panelist to answer each of these questions. So the first question being, if you could, in a couple of sentences, tell us about your current position, what it is, and the responsibilities associated with that. So I'll start off first with Chris.
So, okay, I am the Research Curator and Director of Informatics at the Milwaukee Public Museum. So MPM is a natural history museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin here. My role as curator, I oversee a collection of plants that is the second largest in the state of Wisconsin. These plants are not alive. They're dead and dried and filed away because they're scientific specimens. They've been collected over the last 200 or so years, and we have over 200,000 of these. So they've been collected from all over the place, from all different times. And so that's the curator side. And on the informatics side, I also oversee our museum's database for all the departments. So we have, I oversee just botany on my curator side, but we also have anthropology, history, geology, paleontology, and zoology at the museum. And so the informatics side is overseeing a database which tries to take a century and a half of paper records and turn them into, something searchable and digital, and so we can, look it up on Google.
Great, thanks, Chris. Moving on to Catherine.
So good afternoon, everyone. As Tony mentioned, I am currently the Executive Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. So what it really means, at least in the context of UW Eau Claire, is that I actually have kind of 2 hats. One is that I support the large range of student, faculty, student, staff collaborative projects. A lot of scholarly work, a lot of creative work is supported through this, endeavor. And the other hat that I wear is, it's concerned with contracts and grants, especially extramural, or what we call externally funded grants and contracts. So one might think that perhaps those two hats are kind of independent, but in reality, they are actually very interconnected, especially in the context of a regional comprehensive university, that is, one that supports primarily undergraduates. So one can imagine that when we are looking for resources to support the development of students and the scholarly endeavors of all the range of faculty and staff, given the context that we live in, that support may come in a range of internal funding as well as external funding. And my role really is to find the connectedness between the two and support this whole range of work in the best possible way I can. And therefore, in that particular context, I would say we are supporting the learning of the students as well as the scholarly development and productivity of the staff and faculty within the university.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Sarah, would you mind going next?
Thanks, Tony, and thank you to WiSys for inviting me to participate in this. My name is Sarah Wong. I'm an attorney at the law firm Boyle, Fredrickson. We're located in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Our firm is a specialty law firm, so that means we just focused on one area of law, which is intellectual property. Intellectual property is kind of the umbrella term for patents, trademarks, and copyrights. So patents are inventions. So if you watch the show Shark Tank, people are getting patents on their inventions. Trademarks are logos, slogans, things that people use to advertise their goods. And then copyrights are works of art. So people copyright music is commonly known for copyrights, and then books and other types of artwork. So as an attorney, I work with all three, and I work with WiSys to actually do patents.
Great, thanks. Darin, would you mind going next?
Sure, thanks, Tony. So Darin Driessen, I'm a Director of Open Innovation for Georgia Pacific. GP is probably best known for its paper products, so bath tissue or toilet paper, which has been very popular lately. Paper towel, napkins. We own the Dixie brand, so paper cups and plates and bowls and things like that. In my role for those types of products with open innovation is working with external companies or external sources to find innovations that'll help us grow our business. So I'm located out of our research and development facility in Neenah, Wisconsin. We've got a couple hundred scientists there and PhDs that research all kinds of very interesting topics. But we only have so many people and so much time, so trying to find entrepreneurs, startups, university researchers to work with to identify technologies that might assist us in growing and helping our customers.
Fantastic. And so Adhira.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Tony. I'm from WiSys. I'm the WiSys Manager of Innovative Ventures, and I came on board about 9 months ago with the idea to establish what we're calling WiSys Venture Homes in the communities surrounding UW regional campuses. So the idea with WiSys Venture Home is that it's a network of startup hubs that bring together local entrepreneurial initiatives with the statewide resources that exist. And the idea there is that if we can bring all of these together under one roof, then a local entrepreneur can walk into a venture home and have access to a full menu of entrepreneurial resources at their fingertips. The other part of my job is also working with entrepreneurs and startup companies and bridging the gap between the research and the IP and the patents that are being generated in the UW system, and helping entrepreneurs sort of look through that portfolio, pick out things that are of interest to them, and then work towards building startups and bringing these technologies and ideas to market.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for giving a breakdown of where you are and what you're up to right now. So the next question I want to then move into is discussing your educational background. So if you could one, talk through the schooling that you've gone through, and then within that same context, what would be interesting to find out is when you first started out in your education, and when you were in university, how did your initial career goals differ from where you are now? So let's just stay with Adhira and have you answer first.
Sure. I feel like I've had many careers, but really it's been a path is what it is. I started out with my undergraduate degree being in biomedical engineering, and I picked biomedical engineering in part because I couldn't figure out if I wanted to study sciences or go into the engineering arena, and I felt like that was a major that kind of brought together biology, science, physics, and engineering all into one umbrella. I then continued to get a PhD in biomedical engineering, where my focus was in neuroscience research. So I was very much looking towards going down the academic path. In fact, there's a video of me as a 5-year-old where my mom's asking, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I say, I want to be a scientist and win the Nobel Prize, right? So I was very much geared towards going down the academic route, finished my PhD and realized that I wanted more excitement and more of a fast-paced life than what an academic career can give you. So that's when I started exploring the idea of entrepreneurship, and I worked as an intern. I started working as an intern in a startup studio where we had back in Houston, where all of the technologies, that university-based technologies that were coming out, needed an avenue to actually get to market. And so my role there was evaluating those technologies and figuring out which would be good for our portfolio to then build startups around. And from there, within that organization, I progressed to being a fellow and actually taking charge of a couple of those startup initiatives. And then I moved to Madison and co-founded a startup with a UW-Madison surgeon. And I can talk about that a little bit later. But that's sort of been my career path.
Great, thanks. Darin, would you mind going next?
Sure. So yeah, I started at UW-Platteville. I got a mechanical engineering degree there. Really wanted to be an engineer pretty much my entire life. As a kid, I always took things apart and tried to put them back together and modify them. And if you've ever seen the little Dilbert cartoon, The Knack, that was me. So that's what I always wanted to be, and really going through college, didn't think of doing much other than that. Once I got out of college, I started at an aerospace company. Started working there, designing power electronics, doing the mechanical engineering around power electronics units for airplanes, both commercial and military. Started getting some opportunities to do more leadership as a part of that. So I was managing external suppliers and kind of giving direction to lab technicians and mechanical designers and things like that, which started. And then I getting some feedback about capabilities there. I started thinking about what other beyond engineering made sense for me, and came across the Master of Engineering program at UW-Madison. So did that course concurrently while working, which was entertaining. So getting a master's degree and working at the same time is definitely good to do before you have kids, which is the decision I had made. So that worked out well for me. So from there, continued to grow and do some leadership type roles and progress and get in the career progression maybe a little bit later. But from there, started getting into more org design things, and so started to look at project management as less of just a means of getting things done, but how do you use it to drive an organization? That drove me to get well, they don't have it anymore, but there was an advanced project management certificate course through Stanford. So I went through that and got that certificate, which was really about strategy and operations and in leadership and org design, which was interesting, and did a lot with that, and it kind of led me to where I am today.
Great, thank you. Sarah, would you mind answering next?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I was always kind of attracted towards science and math, but didn't really know what I wanted to do with that. I had a math teacher who said I should be an engineer, and I guess I was very impressionable because I was like, okay, I think I'll go that route. Similar to Adhira, I actually also studied biomedical engineering. I studied down at Washington University in St. Louis. During college, I kind of liked going that route because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with it. I explored consulting and possibly going into business with that degree. But then I kind of got wind of the idea of going into intellectual property and patent law. And I thought it would be kind of exciting to work with inventors, work with startups, talk to some engineers who were also involved in getting patents through their work. And I thought it would be kind of a nice fit for me because although I like science and math, I also enjoyed writing, which is a big part of what I do now. So I kind of just went with it and did law school at Marquette University, which is 3 years. It was challenging to kind of pivot from studying engineering to law school. I never saw myself as a very argumentative person, but I was able to get through law school, and now I'm kind of doing more what I enjoy, which is doing the math and science and the writing.
Great, thanks. Catherine.
Yeah, so I got my Bachelor's of Science degree in molecular biology and biochemistry, and my PhD in cell and molecular biology. So as you can tell, my disciplinary training is in the sciences. I've always loved the sciences, partly because I think I like a systematic way of asking questions and finding answers to those questions. Is not necessarily that I don't like the humanities. In fact, I had teachers who dissuaded me from, getting a science degree because they thought I would be better off, being in the humanities, but that's in the past. Anyway, so since I always loved the sciences and I like a systematic way of finding answers, I thought a research career would be good for me because in my young mind, research is about, finding answers and especially helping people with those solutions that one comes up. So I was initially drawn to that path within academia, being a research scientist. And I did that actually for a few years. But then when I had a soul-searching moment, I realized that I love research, but I actually like supporting others, finding that passion in research and finding the passion in the sciences even better than myself doing the research. And so I started looking for opportunities to kind of pivot. And the first opportunity I got is a faculty position within the UW system, specifically UW Whitewater. So long story short, I got that faculty position. I enjoy teaching. I enjoy teaching both in the classroom and especially in the research labs. So there are lots of opportunities actually within the comprehensives for students to engage in research opportunities, and I love being a research mentor. Then another moment came, another, pivot. And by the way, not all these pivots were planned, it just kind of came along. I realized that in order to better support the students whom I love, maybe a more effective way is not just being a research mentor or an instructor in the classroom, but actually facilitate other people's research. So that led me into more of the administrative roles to try to set policies, to try to implement policies that actually enable other people's success as research mentors, as instructors in the classroom. And so I did that for a few years again, and then other opportunities came along, leading to the current opportunity where I am trying to actually really systematically look at the support system for the faculty and staff within my campus to really enrich the students' experience through undergraduate research and to further enhance our faculty and the staff's professional development through the scholarly productivity. So lots of twists and turns.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I'll give you the opportunity to finish out here for this question.
Sure. So I went to UW-Stevens Point for my bachelor's degree, and like some of us, I didn't have a particular career goal in mind. I was following, what interested me. And my interests were really varied. So I kind of went in, I came in as a freshman and I thought, okay, I'm going to do computer science and fisheries. And I quickly learned there's no class overlaps, and so I'd be there forever. And somehow I landed up with a forestry and biology major when I graduated. And even, as I was coming to my senior year, I wasn't sure what I would do career-wise. I figured I'd work for a government agency or something in natural resources. But then an opportunity for graduate school kind of popped up. So one of my undergraduate professors had a colleague at Iowa State who had a grant. She was looking for a student to do a master's. So I applied for that, and I took the opportunity and did my master's at Iowa State. And then I learned I really enjoyed research, and that helped to kind of point me on a career path. So I thought I'd be going into academia, into a faculty position. To get that, you need a PhD. And when I finished my master's was right around the time that what we now call the Great Recession was happening. And so a lot of things had dried up. It was pretty tough going. So I spent about a year driving a bus to make ends meet, and then finally found a PhD program that I got into, and got my PhD. I actually moved to Canada for that. It was a lot of fun. Got to be an international student. And then,
That's great. Okay, so for the final question for this kind of opening period, this was sort of covered a little bit, I think, in everyone's answers. So what I'll really do is give you an opportunity maybe to kind of expand on what you were already talking about. What I'm curious about is sort of, your career path. So some of that obviously played into, your education and what was happening while you were doing your schooling. But maybe some of that has happened now after you've completed all that schooling. So I'd like to ask everyone to kind of, if there is any more information to add, highlight some of your career path. And then within that path, was there any times where maybe you encountered a challenge that forced you to maybe pivot and go a different direction? So I'll turn it over to Darin first to answer this question.
Sure. So I covered a bit of my career path in the earlier part. I'll say, opportunities are going to come from places that you don't necessarily always expect them to. I think that's, whether it was like early on in my coming out of college, I spent a whole lot of time just testing units in labs, right? And just kind of staring at test units for hours on end. It gets really boring, right? But years later, I came to realize that because I was so familiar with how to test the units and how they performed under test, when I was actually doing the engineering for them, I had almost an innate sense of how they were going to behave while I was designing them. And it really gave me a lot of great intuition. Engineering is, a lot of times people will tell you it's about, about calculations and numbers and calculus and all this stuff, right? But it's a lot of, I think this is what's going to happen, and I'm going to go design a test to prove it is or isn't, and am I wrong, right? And that really boring early experience, or what I thought was a boring early experience, turned out to be extremely valuable, and actually really helped make me into a really strong engineer. So the other thing I would say is that don't let people or upper management, try to talk you out of or dissuade you from going down a path that you're really excited about. One of the companies I worked at, I was a decent engineer, but I really wanted to get into project management, like be a true project manager. I was kind of doing it as part of the role, but I wanted that to be my full-time job. And their response was, well, no, we can't do that because we don't want to lose you as an engineer. You're too good to lose as an engineer. And it's like, well, that's not what I want to do. And I ended up leaving the company because of that and finding a different place to work as a project manager, right? And so, I gave them a lot of opportunities and I tried to be patient about it, but at the end of the day, when it showed that, they just weren't going to meet me where I wanted to go, I had to take that into my own hands and drive my career that way. So I guess that was some piece of advice I got very early on is nobody is going to care about as much about your career as you do. So you always have to remember that no matter how great your boss is, they're still not going to care about your career as much as you do. So always make sure that you're keeping an eye on that and it's going where you want it to go.
Great insight. Thanks, Darin. Sarah, I'll have you go next.
Yeah, I think when I first started going into the patent law route, I really was focused on writing patents, and I thought that is what I was going to do. But once I started working, I saw that there are other things involved with intellectual property, the trademarks and copyrights, but also there's two sides of the patent, so you can either write patents or you can defend them. So I've been involved in the patent defending, the litigation side, which involves going to the patent office and arguing. I've been involved in a couple of trials, and although I'm not naturally very argumentative, I've found a lot of value, and I've actually enjoyed being exposed to that. So I think when I was starting off, kind of being open to learning whatever kind of comes your way is a really good way to think about starting off, and because you never know exactly what you might enjoy, even though you kind of thought you knew what you were doing. So and I would say that even though I do enjoy writing patents, it is that other side of it, the patent litigation, that's really made me a better patent writer, because you can see both sides. So I think there's value in kind of spreading your wings a little bit in terms of what you think you're going to do and kind of what comes your way.
Great. Adhira, anything to add to this question?
Yeah, I think echoing what some of the other panelists have said, when you pivot and when you change your career path, there's always this sense or fear of, well, did I just waste the last 3 years of my life, or the last 6 years of my life? In my case, I spent 6 years, honing my scientific skills, learning how to do research, doing the actual research, writing papers, writing grants, et cetera, and at the end of those 6 years, I went back to being an intern. So, I think at the end of the day, the lesson I learned was, even though it felt at that moment that I was starting from scratch, I would hear terms like business model canvas and what's your value proposition, and I was completely lost. It was new language. It was completely a new field. But what I realized was about 6 months into it, once you learn the lingo, which I think in most cases is like the hardest thing to do. Once you learn the lingo, it turns out all of that scientific training that I had was actually really valuable in evaluating startups and, thinking through what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to have a valuable product. So I would just say, trust that any training that you do, anything that you learn can be applied, the soft skills can be applied to, your new career path, if you will.
Great, thanks, Adhira. Chris, anything to add for your career path or any pivots?
I just want to plus one what Adhira just said, that these logical structures we learn as scientists, they apply all over the place. It's just different disciplines use different jargon to mean the same thing. So it's really amazing. The only thing I would add, so I kind of talked about my path. As far as like a challenge I encountered that led to a pivot, this is one that I have seen happen to a number of academics. So I met a wonderful biologist and we got married, and then we encountered what's called the two-body problem, meaning that when you're a specialist, you generally have only one position for something that's very specialized in a geographic area. So it's hard to find two jobs for two different people who specialize in very similar things. And so in my case, I was in botany and she's in entomology. And So my plan was I was going to be a tenure track academic, and she got there first. So we were, competing for the same position, and then I had to not pivot, but sort of trajectory change. And that's when I found the museum job, and I thought, oh, you know what, this could work too. So
the next kind of grouping of questions I want to get into are a little bit more broadly focused on the area that you've been asked to represent as a panelist today. So this next question may be a little bit difficult to answer just by the nature of kind of, it's a very broad question, I think, but do your best. So that is specifically, stepping back and focusing on the broader field that you are representing as a panelist. What does an entry position in your field look like, and what are the requirements for that position? So I'll start first with Adhira, perhaps the unique one for entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, it is unique for entrepreneurship because, most entrepreneurs are working with a novel idea, right? You're trying to find and implement a solution where a solution doesn't exist. So in a way, no matter how many years you have experience as an entrepreneur, you're kind of always at entry level, and that obviously that can be a good thing, an exciting thing if that's what you like, but it can also be frustrating because with every new startup, with every new idea that you want to pursue, you have to think like a beginner. You have to evaluate what the industry, you have to learn the jargon, and that's something we've talked about, depending on where your idea lies. So, yeah, so you're always an entry level person. And in terms of what it takes, or what did you ask, Tony? What are the requirements?
Yeah, sort of the general requirements.
I think with entrepreneurship, again, it's slightly different, right? You can have a PhD like many of our panelists have, or you can be a high school graduate or a high school dropout. I think the thing that makes an entrepreneur is more personality and more of those soft skills of having passion, having the fortitude to pursue your passion, having the perseverance to say, hey, this company failed, let me go ahead and now try and start a new one. So yeah, that's what I would say you need as an entry-level entrepreneur.
That's great, thanks. Sarah, how about for intellectual property?
Yeah, so I'll just speak to being an intellectual property attorney. If you're starting off, you will probably have a STEM degree. It's going to be a hard science degree or an engineering degree, and then you went to law school. And then when you start off, you're really learning. You don't really, so when you go to law school, you don't select what type of law you are going to practice. I mean, you can take classes in it and you can kind of focus your learning to what you're interested in, but there's not like a degree in intellectual property or patents. So you're really going to just be learning the first couple years, getting exposure to, all three areas: patents, trademarks, and copyrights. And I think you're going to be not so much client interaction, but more so learning from other attorneys, and kind of just it's kind of like a training period. But I would say, you kind of just want to get as much diversity as you can in terms of the work that you get.
Great. All right, Chris. So, if you can, not for profit entry level, but otherwise feel free to focus in on, the museum.
Sure. The reason we're smirking is because that's not-for-profit is a really broad category. In fact, it's this huge category. When you think about how economic sectors are broken up, it's usually government, non-for-profit, industry. It's one way of categorizing it. And I'm going to focus on like the biology, natural resource kind of science side of nonprofits because that's where my experience is. And with those, you can have an entry-level position with a bachelor's degree. You come in, you've got your bachelor's in whatever major or related field. As long as you can show coursework that is related to whatever it is the job is. Usually that's okay. One thing I guess that this is just a tendency, right? It's an overgeneralization, but nonprofits tend to be some of the lowest paying entry-level jobs because you've got the structure of how they're funded comes from, you know, private revenue and then tax breaks, as opposed to industry, which is basically revenue, or government, which is tax funded. But the flip side is, like, you're oftentimes working towards some kind of social cause or something you're extremely passionate about. And so, you know, it's kind of like, I used to get told we were paid in rainbows and sunsets, right? Like you have this, you know, monetary payment, but then there's also these emotional benefits to it. With the environmental side, another requirement that's often seen in entry-level jobs is like physical ability. So they might say, you know, expect to be working outside and exposed to the elements, being able to work in the rain, or being able to lift certain things or work with tools or something like that. That's oftentimes something else you'll see.
Darin, how about in industry?
Yeah, I'll probably focus a bit more in engineering, just because that's probably what I'm most familiar with. So generally, you know, entry-level engineers are given mentors, senior level people that can help them out and help guide their thought process and how they move forward. Typically not, you know, bachelor's degree is most common for engineers coming out. We don't see a lot of master's degrees, and definitely not a lot of PhDs in engineering typically. At GP we have a lot of scientists, and in those areas masters and PhDs do definitely make a lot more sense, because they're doing a lot more theoretical research and a bit more cutting edge, whereas, you know, engineering is a bit more applied technology, if you will. So, you know, a lot of typically, you know, I've seen where they're, you know, supporting existing units or existing products that are in the field, doing quality, you know, issues and design fixes for those types of things, or smaller projects. You know, I think I've always told, you know, engineers that in college they teach you how to think, and think like an engineer and problem solve. And once you get into at your company, that's when you really teach you how to be an engineer, right? You know, there's so many ways you can take an engineering degree. It's impossible for a university to teach you all of that. But they do teach you how to problem solve and how to think and be somebody, you know, that can solve those problems and be proactive about it. So.
Great, thanks, Darin. And finally, Catherine, entry level in the world of academia, what does that look like?
Well, the world of academia is so big, right? So one can think of academia as actually a project manager or support personnel, such as the lab technician, right? So in those scenarios, the entry level position would be somebody who typically has a bachelor's degree and working within a group to support the overall mission, if you will, of the group. Say in the research lab, if you're the technician, you are one piece of that larger picture of, you know, getting to whatever research agenda that the lab is set up to do. But if you think about more on, say, the faculty side, then I think the picture looks quite different, right? Because the so-called entry-level position for a faculty is a PhD. Well, in some cases, in instructional staff in particular, one could actually have a master's degree and teach in a university. But if we think of a faculty position rather than an instructional academic staff, then an entry-level position really requires a PhD. So there are different, the good news is that there are actually different positions within academia, and therefore there are different scenarios what that entry-level position might look like. And so, you know, one just has to look for something that is, you know, suitable for in your own situation. And by entering into a, I guess, entry-level position, it does not preclude you from, I guess, working up, if you will, to a different series, different levels of positions. So they're not mutually exclusive.
That's great, thanks. I know that was somewhat challenging for most of you to try and put into the context or put into a small sound bite here for this discussion. But building off of that, my next question, knowing that our students here, are in varying levels of their education, some are earlier on, first year, sophomore, some are, soon to be graduating in the junior, senior level, and some actually have graduated and are out there looking for work. So kind of, we heard what maybe some of the educational requirements are for entry-level positions in your various fields. What I'm curious to learn a little bit more about is what are some additional expectations that there might be for job candidates in your area. So for example, what's the real world looking for in terms of, say, lab skills or perhaps work experience while they were earning their degree, or things such as soft skills, partnering or working in teams, ultimately kind of getting at what are some additional things that our students can do to separate themselves as candidates from the rest of the pool. So I'll start first with Adhira.
Let's look at this in a slightly different way from, the conversation about the entry-level position. You could be an entrepreneur where you say, I have this brilliant idea, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to bring it to market, and I'm going to be a millionaire in a year and a half, right? The other option is, as a recent graduate, if you just want to learn about startups, if you want to get that entrepreneurial experience without putting your personal finances at risk, or maybe you don't know what you're passionate about and you don't have that big idea yet, right? You can also join startups. So if you want to join a startup, oftentimes the founder of the startup will either have a technical degree and will be looking for somebody with more of a management experience or education, or you'll have somebody who's from the management field, knows how to run a company, but doesn't have the technical expertise and might be looking for engineers, software engineers, hardware engineers. The third category that startups are often looking for are people who have marketing skills, marketing and social media and promotions and things like that. So all of those are skills that I think can help startups. If you have all of them in yourself, then I would say go start your own company and do it by yourself, but almost nobody has that. So I think one of the big soft skills that you need is understanding what your personal limitations are and being able to work with people with varying backgrounds to kind of fill in the different gaps that you need to start your company.
Great, thanks, Adhira. Sarah, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I would say that the two things are important to kind of distinguish yourself is having the strong technical background. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but before you maybe go to law school, a lot of patent attorneys will get industry experience. And I think that's a really nice thing to have. You can talk the lingo with the inventors that come in, and that's really important. And that kind of goes along with the communication skills. It's so important that the inventors trust you and they know that you can convey their invention in the proper way. So having those communication skills, I would say nowadays, most of the time we're communicating through phone and email. So if you can, improve your skills over the phone, but an email is a big way that we communicate. What used to be, written up very formally on letterhead is now done in an email. So kind of, learning how to convey kind of difficult concepts through email, I think is a really great skill to kind of hone, especially, everyone texts nowadays. So it's easy to not get good at, kind of talking more professionally in an email. So so those are the two things I would say to work on.
Great. So professional beginnings and professional endings to emails is key. All right, Chris, how about you? What are your thoughts here?
Well, I agree with the professionalism. That's a big deal, and it kind of dovetails on what I'd say about nonprofits. Is no matter what, whether you work for a really small nonprofit or a really big one, almost all the employees, well, all the are going to have donors, right? Because that's a major source of income for a not-for-profit. So that means that maybe a tour will come by. You're doing whatever you're doing, working your regular shift, and the president's going to come by, and they're going to bring some VIP with you, with them. And so you have to be ready to kind of like give a quick elevator speech and just make the organization look good. So that's one skill that it's kind of a soft skill that you can't get taught. You just kind of gotta learn it, and professionalism is a part of that. I would say the only other piece is like when I'm looking to hire and I'm calling references, the big thing that I ask references about is what kind of reliability does the person have? Like, do they show up on time? Do they do what they do when they say they're going to do it? So if you can build that reputation for yourself, that will take you a long way.
Great, thanks, Chris. Darin, how about you? What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I would say what I'm looking at, or what I've seen other people look at, is what are they doing from like clubs and working with other groups? Did they have a leadership role in some of these other external organizations? What else did you do beyond just going through your career curriculum, right? And I think one of my biggest pet peeves is because this happens on everything, but it seems like senior design projects for engineers, right? Almost all the time, it's like, yeah, give me an example of how you work. Oh, we had so and so that was a slacker and they didn't do their job, and the rest, and I ended up doing all the work. And it's like everybody you talk to had the exact same experience. So it's always like, well, which one of you really did all the work then, right? But don't frame it up that way, right? Is everybody on your team has got a different capability and a different way that they can create value. And how did you find the way they created the best value, how the way you created the best value, and how did you mesh that together to get the most out of the people that you worked with, right? I think again, being somebody that's not helpless, but that can kind of takes control, makes the best out of the situation, and says, all right, this is what I've been dealt, this is what I can do with it. To me, that's always something that I look for.
Fantastic, thanks, Darin. And Catherine, finally to you, what are your thoughts?
Yep. So in a kind of complex organization, just like academia, I think what we're looking for, of course, is the best fit, right? Whether somebody can contribute to the group in the small group as well as overall. But even within the small group context, what we're looking for is the fit in terms of the team. Will this new person get along both in terms of personality as well as the technical skill set, if there's a technical requirement? But I would also say that, especially for forward-thinking organizations, one also would be looking for team members who can actually enhance the group, even with an entry-level position. So we will be looking for candidates who can bring that piece of extra in, new insights, new energy, whatever the group is looking for. So exactly what those skill sets are would be different in different scenarios. But I think for job seekers, that's what one should be thinking about. How would you defend your position in terms of how you would fit into the team, as well as how you would be able to elevate the team, for instance. And communication is key, right? You cannot be part of the group without being a good communicator at all levels, your peers, your supervisors, and the bigger organization at large.
So, as I mentioned at the start of today's event, normally we would be having this panel discussion at our large in-person Spark Symposium. But of course, with the current pandemic, we're making do and going the virtual route here. So with that in mind, and actually this reflects the kind of the most asked, or the topic of most concern by our students that registered. If you could, speak to new employment, or perhaps, what your industry or organization is doing during this time, during this pandemic. Are jobs available, or should students be considering other things at this point to, improve their resume? Do you have any recommendations for our recent graduates or soon to be graduates? And first I'll start off with Chris.
Sure. So, I can speak from my particular situation and then a couple of my colleagues. The pandemic is tough, right? And most of us in these nonprofit sectors were non-essential, and so we were under immediate government shutdowns. It's like we came in on Monday, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, you got 8 hours and you're going to be out of your desk for who knows how long. So with that, for a while, it was like hiring was frozen because organizations were trying to figure out how to keep the people they had with no revenue coming in because our ability to make money was gone. The Government CARES Act kicked in, which was a big help. So through loans and paycheck protection and things like that. So that has helped. And actually in the last 2 weeks, I have been seeing the job market kind of thaw a little bit. So more jobs have been popping up. And I think, for you guys that are looking for jobs, there is hope because it's starting to come back now. We're going to reopen very soon, but it's going to look like a very different situation for staff. Staff are going to have to wear masks. We're going to have to go through health checks every day when we come back to work. That's just because we work with the public, right? So we need to have the safety of the public in mind. So the staff is doing all of this stuff to protect our visitors and our customers.
Great, thanks, Chris. Catherine, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think in academia in general, this scenario is quite similar to the nonprofits. In that, at least at the beginning of the pandemic, the employment situation is quite bleak, but it is slowly but surely improving. And if one is thinking about universities in particular, there is actually now a heightened need for support, for tech support related to remote learning. So that is actually an opportunity for students who have that area of expertise, or at least who are interested and have some skill sets in that area. So the employment picture, if you will, is not completely closed. And I think it is important to think about one's interest and areas of strength and try to find a match between your own scenario and the opportunities out there, and be flexible, right? Be flexible about what you can offer, be flexible about what you're willing to take, at least in the immediate term.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Darin, how are things at GP looking right now?
Yeah, it depends on the area, right? And on the manufacturing side, we've been, moving very quickly to keep our supply chain going and keep all the stores full of toilet paper has been popular in the news. From an R&D perspective, it's been a little bit tougher because, with not being in the office and working from home, a lot of the hiring has slowed down and things like that. So, I think from a new grad perspective or a soon-to-be grad perspective, it's a really good time to start thinking about, is a master's degree an interesting option at this point, and go do that until the job market picks back up. I think Adhira's suggestion on looking at startups is a great one. If you go back to 2008 recession, when a lot of people lost their jobs back then, that became a really big surge in innovation and new startups. And this is likely going to happen again, where a lot of people that lost their jobs are out there going, they've got these skills and these capabilities, and how are they going to leverage them? And they probably are aware of needs in the market that need to be solved, and might be spinning up their own companies to do that. So like Wisconsin has a job board, almost specifically focused on careers with startups, right? So that might be an interesting place to start. And maybe you're not going to make the most money, but getting in early with a startup, and if it's successful, that's a really great place to be. The other thing I would suggest is look at the industries that are thriving because of the coronavirus, right? Go look at healthcare, look at hygiene startups, things like that, scanning technologies, all these things that are that'll go in and try to make the post-COVID world a more easy place to manage. Find companies like that, because they are hiring, and those are great places to go. And frankly, healthcare is, I hate to say the word recession-proof, right? But it's always a key area to look in. So finding companies in those areas, look at where government contracts are being handed out, right? And follow those as well, right? Look at the news and see where funding is going and where that's happening. And those are great places to go to look for job opportunities.
Great, Darin. Thanks. A lot of great points in there. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you next.
Yeah, I would say that our firm's hiring is not very normal right now. Our business is down because our client's business is down, and so it's kind of a trickle effect. But I would say generally hiring for us has always been a timing thing, and sometimes you just have to get a little bit lucky with timing. When we hire, we don't necessarily follow the academic schedule. So if our need improve, or if conditions improve in December, we're gonna look for people in December. So I would say, if you're a recent grad, use this time to maybe look for some opportunities in industry. If you want to go the law school route, start looking at that, but kind of be ready for when things improve, and that can be at any time. So, just kind of always just keep a lookout for opportunities to pop up.
Fantastic. And Adhira, you have the final word here.
Oh, how exciting. Well, I feel like I could end on a slightly more positive note because the good thing about being an entrepreneur is you're hiring yourself, so you can always be hiring, right? The other thing I would also say is, we've been hearing about a lot of internships being canceled, summer internships that students had lined up being canceled. One great way to get some experience and expertise is actually to work with startups. It might be an unpaid internship, but I can assure you that you will get a lot of experience and you'll have a lot more responsibility in a 3-person startup as an intern than you would at some of the bigger companies where you might have had, internships lined up. So look into that and feel free to contact me. We've got a bunch of startups within the WiSys Venture Home program who are looking for interns, especially interns with management and marketing experience, but also interns with technical expertise. The other thing I would say is, kind of following Darin's point, look where the money is going. While investments have slowed down, government investment, venture capital investments have slowed down, but government and nonprofits are now investing more and more in small business development and new business startups. So again, look into that if you're interested in a startup, going the startup route. So.
With that, thank you all again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.